Welcome once again to Sid Caudle Christian People's Alliance. And we're not going to just leave the football or sport to the end. We're going to interlace it because it's been a bit of a big sports week from lots of reasons. If you're Welsh, it's not been a good time. If you're an Olympian in the snow games, eventually it's been a good time, but there's a story behind that. And what we want to go to first, Sid, is a bit of politics, because we get stuff from the States, as you know, a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff being in Europe because we are in Europe. And what's coming out more than anything these days is how politics is christened. Is it right? Is it far right? You tell me. But I tell you what, there's a lot of parties that are considered to be fascist, far right, and it's clearly nonsense, no more so than Portugal, whereas they're still combating. But it appears that the person that was centrist has really gone through the far right christening. Oh, you're far right, you're no good. And it's affected the public in their votes, and they've voted again towards the left. Now, what is this? Because we get it in the United Kingdom as well. Oh, that's far right. And it's not. It's centre or centre right at best. What's going on here? Is this all they can do is name call?
To be honest with you, I think it depends on your perspective. You see, when Jeremy Corbyn was leader of the Labour Party, he said, "I'm a democratic socialist. I'm in the centre." So, if you're looking from Jeremy Corbyn's perspective and you're looking at someone like Nigel Farage, you would say, "Oh, he's far right." But you see, I can't really imagine who was actually to the left of Jeremy Corbyn. It's, to me, it's mind-boggling to think that anyone could be to the left of Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, he was totally in favour of complete nationalisation of everything, state control of everything. I mean, he supported Hamas and so on and so forth. But you see, it's the same as the Greens, frankly. I mean, if you think the Greens are in the centre, then Nigel Farage, anybody, is certainly far right, because the Greens are supporting Hamas and they've got this extreme climate hoax, and they're also supporting state ownership of everything, But if you're in the Conservative Party, for instance, and you say, well, the Conservative Party's in the centre, then you look at the Communist Party, you look at Jeremy Corbyn, you say, oh, they're far left. And you look at something like the Liberal Democrats and you say, well, they're certainly on the left. And then you look at someone like Nigel Farage and you would say, well, yeah, he's on the right. And, and maybe you look at somebody, well, traditionally like BNP, for instance, and you would say, well, BNP, they would support anyone that supports Adolf Hitler or somebody like that. You would say, well, they're far right. But somebody like Nigel Farage certainly wouldn't be far right if you were in the Conservative Party. You would, But you see, it's important to understand is what people's perspective are, and unfortunately, the BBC basically supports the Green Party, supports Jeremy Corbyn. They're very much on the far left. So you see, if from their perspective, somebody like Nigel Farage is understandably considered to be far right. So you've got to start from saying, well, what's your perspective? And then when you establish what their perspective is, then you can ask the question as to where everybody else is.
Yes, indeed. I'm going to fly straight into something else. And I've mentioned sport. There's been a change in the way Pride are investing, not necessarily money, but themselves in sporting events. And of course, it started off with BLM taking the knee, doing all sorts of things. Last year, it was the rainbow shoelaces. Well, they've got even more clever. And what they're doing is putting almost brainwashing us in sports coverage. And I first noticed this in TNT, but Sky Sports are just as bad. if you notice in an interval, I'll give you an example. This is during a match. Suddenly they have a replay of the corner of the penalty or whatever, and there's a bumper, a little bit of an intro, and it's a picture that you almost miss of pride and all the rainbow colours. Now, when I used to run a Sky Channel, Ofcom were very, very strict on certain things, and one thing is brainwashing. You'll be surprised how you can brainwash. Everything is broken up. Let's simplify this into 25 frames a second. And if you suddenly flash one or even 2 frames up, you can't see it, depending on how alert you are. But I tell you what, it goes into the brain and brainwashes you. Now, this flash of pride, let's call it, is about a quarter of a second. You can miss it. It's not in brainwashing territory because Ofcom wouldn't allow that, but it's the next best thing. And throughout the match, you are bombarded with pride. And not only that, outside the football ground, there are LED signs promoting pride. And also around the ground on those cleverly lit signs, you will see pride being promoted. Now you think, how much are they paying for this? I'll tell you, 0. There's an agreement between the Premier League, who in effect are paying for this. Oh, yes, you can put these flash adverts up, let's call them, and people are being practically brainwashed. Sid, it's totally wrong, especially when you think, well, what could they do with their money? Because this is Football League money. In other words, the punters pay for this. I'll tell you what they could do. How about saying, help those with prostate cancer get checked early? Now, that would be a good idea to get people, because most of the supporters are male. Ideal example of how it could help. But no, they're promoting pride the whole time. LGBT are rejoicing. Comments, please.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it's completely unacceptable. I think it's very sad that politics has crept into football. I mean, it's good that there are a lot of footballers that are committed Christians. I mean, it's interesting. Arsenal actually has a group of 10 of their frontline footballers that are meeting regularly for prayer and Bible study. And Mark Gurhey, of course, I mean, when he was captain of Crystal Palace, he was told he had to wear this rainbow armband. So he put on the rainbow armband, Jesus Saves. And even now, he writes texts on his football boots. So they're there. And, there's other footballers that are very strong, very committed Christians that are unafraid to talk about it. And when they're interviewed after a match, they'll talk about their faith. And the fact that these are excellent footballers playing for England, international standard, makes it even better that they're giving such a wonderful example. So it's not all bad. But yes, what the authorities are doing is completely unacceptable. And of course, for a long time, we had Gary Lineker presenting BBC. And Gary Lineker was a wonderful footballer and, a wonderful example as an England footballer. But as a commentator, when he started talking politics, he was absolutely terrible. I mean, he was literally supporting Hamas and supporting, supporting Islamic terrorism. And you think, what? And finally, the BBC says, sorry, he's now become unacceptable to too many people because there's too many people objecting to his political views. So they finally get rid of him. But the fact that somebody like that, expressing those sort of extreme political views, could continue commentating for so long for the BBC, to me is unacceptable, frankly. But, this is the modern world that we live in. But any promotion of pride is basically promoting the new age religion and it's promoting a religion that's unacceptable to me and should not be promoted. End of story.
Okay, I'm going to mention Arsenal in a little while. Before we do, let's look at the Employment Rights Bill, of course, Angela Rayner's invention or promotion. Well, people are calculating the damage of this because it's still going to go ahead. Okay, they've softened on 1 or 2 points, but it's going to add 680 million of costs to small and medium businesses. Labour do not like SMEs, but this is the majority of our business in the United Kingdom. And if you want to kill off the United Kingdom, you certainly go against small businesses. So what's going on here? Well, they want unions to have more and more rights. And they want to have unions to be able to walk into any size of business, although there are some numbers being quoted of 25 and less, but it still includes a lot of small businesses. The union can go in there anytime and talk to the people as though they were the representatives of the workers of that small business. And if anybody has got a complaint, they'll certainly help out or hinder if you're the owner of that business. They want to unionize every person. Too much power, Sid?
Well, as I've said before, the socialists don't understand the economy. You see, they see the economy as like a cake, which needs to be divided up more fairly. So if you take money off the rich and give it to the poor, you have a fairer economy. And what they believe that unions are doing is basically fighting for the rights of poorer people and taking money off the rich barons that don't need it and giving it to the poor union people, poor workers that do need it a lot more, and they're creating a much fairer society. That's what they believe. Now, the reality is that the economy is like a train where the engine is business. And unless you support business, you don't have any money, you don't employ people. It's the business employs people. So if you don't have any business, you don't have anybody being employed, and then also you don't have business paying tax because successful businesses pay a lot of tax. So the tax then goes to pay for education and the health service and benefits and defence and goodness knows what else that government does. And it's not government that creates wealth. It's business that creates wealth. Now, I know socialists want to take over business, but when they take over business, which is Jeremy Corbyn, who we took over earlier, that's his policy. But when they take over business, they invariably run it very badly. So you then have a situation like you have in Venezuela, where you've got the government running all the businesses and hyperinflation because they run the business extremely badly. So what you've got to do as a government is look after business to encourage wealth and encourage wealth creation. And that's why what they're doing doesn't work and is causing massive deficit. I mean, see what we've actually had since Labour came into power is a massive increase in the deficit. The actual figures, by the way, for the last 8 months of this financial year, 140 billion. So what it's going to be by the end of the financial year is probably going to be something close to 200 billion, which is a massive increase on what they inherited. They inherited a deficit of about 100 billion. So borrowing's gone up phenomenally. And that's as well as taxes having gone up by 60 billion under this government. Because you see, they don't know what they're doing. They literally have no idea, this government, about running a successful economy. That's the reality of it.
Sid, I'm going to give you a nightmare situation now. More and more people are talking about it. The next election is far from clear. We're in new territory. There are a lot of parties involved and a long time to go. I hope not. I hope it's a shorter time, but who knows? But there's talk now of the Greens holding hands with the Lib Dems, who will eventually hold hands with the Labour lefties that are at the moment controlling our country, the backbenchers. Now, that could be an alliance that could do some damage and get even elected. What a nightmare. If you think what the Greens stand for, you've mentioned one thing already, no NATO's another, no nuclear, and other absolute mad concepts. Then you've got the Lib Dems. Who knows where they're standing under their new leadership? The other day I was talking to Lembit Opik. I don't know whether you remember, but Lembit was MP for Swansea. And Nigel wants him to stand again in Wales, and he's refused for a number of reasons. But there are real problems he has disclosed with the Lib Dems. This front, as we call it, having Ed Davey doing crazy things. It's like watching a game show. Often when he's canoeing down a river, falling off a tightrope, or whatever he's up to. And then you've got the extreme Marxists and Trotskyists that are inhabiting the left of the Labour Party. Now, that's a pretty left-leaning party. Is it dangerous?
Well, absolutely, it's dangerous. Now, see, let's just talk about the Lib Dems for a moment first. You see, traditionally, the Lib Dems have been seen as in the centre. And we had a situation in 2010 where Nick Clegg had joined with David Cameron, and we had a coalition government of Liberal Democrats and Conservatives. And although the Liberal Democrats pushed through some legislation with the Conservatives that I find unacceptable, and obviously we never went back to GP fund holding in the National Health Service, which we should have done, which Tony Blair scrapped to solve the problems with the National Health Service. So although some bad things happened during that period, on the whole, we had good, and that was great credit to the Liberal Democrats and the fact that they were willing to come into power with the Conservatives and deal with a terrible deficit which the Labour Party had left. And on the whole, we had good government. Now, it seems as though since then they've shifted dramatically to the left. What actually happened in the 2024 election was that the Liberal Democrats had an unofficial pact with the Labour Party. I mean, there was no official pact, but it was very clear that there were certain seats that the Liberal Democrats were focusing on, and there were other seats where the Liberal Democrats weren't campaigning at all, and they were just leaving them to the Labour Party to campaign. And that's why the Liberal Democrats ended up with 70 odd seats in Parliament. It was because of this unofficial pact with the Labour Party. Now, since then, they've certainly been adopting a far more left-wing position. And Ed Davey has now made it clear that in another hung parliament, there's no way that he would support the Conservatives. He would support the Labour Party in any future hung parliament, whatever the mathematics said. Now, that's quite interesting. Now, the other thing that's also happened is that the Liberal Democrats have actually come out in favour of Hamas and have spoken out against Israel. Now, that's interesting because they've now positioned themselves on that issue to the left of the Labour Party. Because the Labour Party have actually, well, certainly initially, were supportive of Israel. They supported prescribing Palestinian action, for instance, and is only latterly, under a lot of pressure from the left wing of the Labour Party, that Keir Starmer said that he would recognise a Palestinian state, which appears to be a tokenist thing anyway. But Keir Starmer hasn't been talking about Israeli genocide and supporting Hamas and goodness knows whatever. So, but the Liberal Democrats have, and the Greens certainly have as well. So we now appear to have a situation where the Greens and the Liberal Democrats are the left of the Labour Party, and as you say, are now have more in common with the left of the Labour Party than they do with the majority of the Labour Party. So, yeah, that is a matter of grave concern that we now have this new coalition of the left, apparently. But there must be a lot of Liberal Democrat MPs that are unhappy with this. And the other thing that happened, by the way, with the Liberal Democrats is that prior to the last general election, there were two selected candidates of theirs David Campanale in Sutton and Robert Fellow in Stoke, that were deselected because they opposed the criminalisation of prayer outside abortion centres. And it's like, well, and it's like, what? I mean, we've just now gone through. Prayer is now criminal outside abortion centres. And they said, as Christians, we can't support this. And the Liberal Democrats said, well, if you don't support the criminalisation of prayer, you can't be a Liberal Democrat candidate. Now, that to me shows that the Liberal Democrats, which supposedly were, well, the whole idea of liberalism is that we can have a very broad church and, we respect different points of view within the party. Suddenly we don't respect different points of view anymore. You now have to be on the left. If you're now not on the left, then you can't be in the Liberal Democrats anymore. And that basically is very, very bad. When you think there's people in the past like Alan Beath and David Alton that were Liberal MPs, that were strong Christians, now we can't have that anymore.
Fascinating. And it really has to be tied up, because people are losing faith in politicians more than ever before.
Yeah.
And nobody believes a word from some politicians. It's not only Starmer, it's other people as well. There's no trust. Oh, it's only a politician saying that he'll change his mind and flip-flop. If there's no trust, there's no hope, Sid.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And you see, we almost seem to have gone back to the situation that we had prior to the 2010 election, when the Liberals said, under no circumstances will we ever vote to increase tuition fees. Then they got elected and went into coalition with the Conservatives and voted to increase tuition fees. And Vince Cable, I remember, said, "Oh, those were just election promises. You don't really expect us, do you, to follow through with election promises? Those things are just something we said to get elected." It's like, well, what? So, I mean, really, you're undermining the whole electoral system when you say, "Oh, we just say things to get elected, but when we're elected, we do something totally different." But that's exactly what's happened with Keir Starmer. He's come into power with a manifesto and telling people, this is what I'm going to do. And then after getting elected, has done things completely different. And not surprisingly, very early on in this Labour government, they took their manifesto down from their website. So it'd be very difficult for people to read their manifesto. But I read it, so I know what it said. And for instance, on the economy, it said, we will increase taxes by 8.5 billion, and they gave the specific taxes they were going to increase, one of which, by the way, was VAT on private school fees, which they put in their manifesto and which they've done. But they said any more spending will come from existing budgets, that we will not increase spending beyond this very specific tax increases that we're going to put into effect. And they came into power, and in a matter of days, they just scrapped the manifesto and they've actually increased taxes by 66 billion. That's just one example. We could go on and on and on with what they've done, which is totally different from what they said that they would do.
Yeah, let's switch sports and go to Michael Schumacher. And we think back to that terrible accident he had 10 years ago. And we've not seen him at all. And his wife has closed the doors completely. He spends his time between his £60 million house overlooking Lake Geneva and his other house practically worth the same in Mallorca. And that's it. Nobody knows what's happened to him. Not a word has come out. Well, it started to. He was a phenomenal world champion, 7 world championships, Formula One. And it's so cruel, Sid. Off-piste, I believe, hits a rock with his head, had all the best skiing equipment, but if you hit a rock at 60 mile an hour or whatever, it's like hitting something on a motorbike, I suppose, at that speed. And three or four people are sort of allowed in to see him every now and again. But actually, he's now in a wheelchair. He's no longer bedridden. So there has been some improvement, not a lot. But what's coming out is that he doesn't, people think, realize that he was Formula One champion. He does watch with a confidant his old manager in the Formula One stable racing, but he doesn't seem to connect with it as he should. So it's all very sad. They're spending £10,000 a week on medics and carers to look after him. As a matter of interest, certain confidants of the family have actually got some pictures out of him, and they've been promptly put in jail. That's how much the doors are closed, and probably for the right reasons. Leave him alone. Let's try and get him in some sort of recovery. People are amazed that he's in a wheelchair. So there has been some recovery there. So very sad. And at the height of one's powers, anything can happen, Sid.
Yes, I mean it was very clear to me that from day one that he'd had severe brain injury, and because he'd had very severe brain injury, that the public couldn't basically look at him or engage with him anymore. But it is tragic. I mean, I'm pleased to hear that he's getting the very best care available. He obviously did earn millions and millions as a Formula One driver, and I guess if he's got a property that he no longer needs worth 60 million, then he can sell that, and that can help pay for his medical care. But yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to think that he could get people around him that could pray for him, and through prayer he could be healed. I believe in the power of prayer to heal people. But apart from that, I've got very little to say, really. I mean, I think it is, like you say, tragic, but it's man's extremity is God's opportunity. I'm a big believer in that.
Yes, we wish him well. And going back to something you said again earlier, we've got a by-election coming up at the end of this month in Gorton, in Greater Manchester. And as we've mentioned before, 30% of the people available for voting are Muslim. And Nigel's put in there a good candidate, but not necessarily would fit in with the northern scene. That's Matt Goodwin. And are we going to learn much from this, Sid? Because it's such a one-off, rather like Philly, of course. Will it give any indication of what's going to happen in the future?
Well, it's interesting that in this seat, the Muslims, as you say, who perform, who are a large minority in the constituency, have actually come out in support of the Green candidate. Now, if they follow this through, and the Muslims do tend to block vote, it's not like Christians, unfortunately, who all tend to vote against each other, so never actually achieve anything. The Muslims tend to block vote and literally decide which candidate they're going to support, and on that basis, they do have a habit of winning. I mean, often in by-elections, they've actually got behind George Galloway, who actually said he thought about standing in this seat, but decided not to, possibly because the Muslims actually said to him, no, we're going to get behind the Green candidate. So, yeah, it is on that basis likely that the Greens will do very well, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if they don't actually win this election. It'll be significant from a point of view of whether the Muslims are going to get behind the Labour Party at the next election, because you see, they didn't in the last election. because of the Labour Party's support for Israel, basically. So what they did there was to put up a lot of independent candidates, and I believe some 6 or so of them actually got elected, which are basically independent candidates supporting Islamic terrorism. And it's terrible that we've actually got people like that in Parliament. And the effect of that, by the way, was actually seen when Maccabi Tel Aviv were playing Aston Villa in Birmingham, and it was these MPs that were putting a lot of pressure on the police to ban all the Israeli supporters from attending the match. And they were successful in putting the pressure on the police, and the police agreed to the request from the MPs because they were elected MPs. And obviously, the police do have to take notice of what elected MPs are saying. But it's tragic that that happened. But in this by-election, it'd be very interesting to see the votes that the Greens get and the votes the Labour Party get. Now, because basically the Greens and the Labour Party are going to be divided, it could well be that reform could come through the middle. There are, even though there may be 35% Muslims in the constituency, there's still 65% non-Muslims. So there's still a possibility that reform could win. The Conservatives will get a derisory vote, without a shadow of doubt. The Conservatives will be voting for reform. The Liberal Democrats are there, but they'll also get a derisory vote. So it appears to be that the candidates are Reform, Greens, and Labour. So it really depends on whether the people on the left in that constituency will reject the Labour Party and all vote Green, which is what basically happened in the Welsh election, where it looked likely the Reform were going to win in the Welsh by-election. I can't remember what constituency it was now, but it was a by-election where it looked as though Reform were likely to win. The Labour Party vote was collapsing, so everyone on the left then went and voted for Plaid Cymru, who then won the election. So that could well happen, but we'll have to wait and see. But it is certainly interesting to see what's going to happen.
Right, let's move on to Gavin Ashenden. Now, Gavin and I have worked together for donkey's years on various programmes, and he's been appearing on, anything from the BBC to GB News. Does a lot for GB News, and I heard him the other evening, and I thought, wow. He was talking about Islam, and I thought, oh, he's coming straight out with certain things there. I wonder if he will be invited back in the future. And I thought, right, let's get to the nub of this. And I invited him onto the show and put to him various points. And we've put this program out. And boy, are we getting a reaction. Now, Gavin's not a shouty, quite distinct and calm, theological, thoughtful, and of course to Queen Elizabeth II, paid regular visits as a chaplain to her. And the least you would expect a person that appears to be possibly part of the elite was to come out and say a number of things. The first thing he said, we are in danger of a pincer movement in the United Kingdom. On the one side, you've got Islam. On the other, you've got Marxism. Do you agree with that, Sid?
Well, I think he's right in the sense of the danger. I don't think he's right in the sense that it's already a done deal and there's nothing we can do about it. But he's certainly right that it's a danger because the left have got no idea what's going on with Islam at all and don't want to know. As far as they're concerned, Islam is an enemy of Christianity and Christianity is also their enemy. And they're quite happy to join with Islam and work with Islam in any way that they want. And we've just talked about the Green Party and the Liberal Democrats, etc., and the extent to which they've been trying to get Muslims to vote for them, and the extent to which the Labour Party has been losing Muslim votes, but the Labour Party has also been working very hard to try and win back Muslim votes. So, for instance, they're talking about a new definition of Islamophobia, as if suddenly, we need a new legal a new law passed to protect Muslims because Muslims are under a lot of pressure. I was also hearing today, by the way, also that that small boat migrants that are coming over have been given 500,000 as some reward for damaging their human rights. I mean, just utter nonsense, But that just shows the extent to which the left have got no idea what's going on. What I'm referring to basically is that it's now proven that the people coming over in small boats are basically Muslims coming over to make the West more Islamic. And that was something which Mamdani, the mayor of New York, actually said openly. These people are on a Hajj in order to follow the example of the Prophet Muhammad, who went on a journey in order to make Mecca Islamic. And that's what they're doing. So Mamdani's told us that that's what's going on. So if we come back now to Gavin Ashenden, see what he's saying, he's identified something which is very real. Muslims working with the left in order to take on the Christian religion, basically, and the Christian basis of the West, which it has been. I mean, the basis of this country has been Christian in the past. Yeah, and it is a very real concern. And he also said that it's a major concern. He said 99% of people in this country don't know what Islam is about, which I don't know whether that's true or not. I think increasingly people do not know what Islam is about. I certainly do. I mean, I've studied the religion, and he gave an example of somebody that couldn't identify where it says in the Quran that Islam is a violent religion, because a Muslim said to him, "Oh, no, Islam is a religion of peace." I mean, have you got any evidence to the contrary? Well, of course there is. I mean, the Quran's full of sword verses, Surah 9:5, kill the disbelievers, Surah 47, 1-4. It says very clearly, it defines what a believer is and what a disbeliever is, and then says, cut off the heads of disbelievers. And we can go on. And ISIS has got no problem in quoting the Quran to justify their action. It even quoted a verse in the Quran that said, "We will strike terror into their hearts." I mean, there's masses of verses in the Quran that you can quote, and the idea that somehow that Islam is a peaceful religion is just a lie, and it's a blatant lie. But they've got no problem in telling lies. I mean, because as Gavin Ashenden quite rightly said, one of the tenets of Islam is taqiyya, which actually means it's a good thing to lie to disbelievers to gain an advantage. So if you're lying and saying Islam is a peaceful religion and thereby you're gaining an advantage, in Islam, that's a good thing to do. You see, people don't understand this either, which is very, very important to understand that concept. Because in Judeo-Christianity, we've got, the commandment, you shall not bear false witness. And Jesus said, I am the truth. So we believe telling the truth is a fundamental part of who we are and a fundamental part of our society. That is not the same in Islamic societies. They believe it's a good thing to tell the truth to each other, to a fellow Muslim. You're not supposed to lie to a fellow Muslim, but you are supposed to lie to disbelievers to gain advantage. And you've got to understand that, because the BBC have got nowhere near grasping that.
Well, you said that it's not too late. It's not already happened, the takeover. But I tell you what, there are certain parts of the country that you've got to ask yourself that twice. One is London and many of the northern cities. And when you look at close on 12 mayors and assistant mayors, it's very complicated these days. The next thing that Gavin said, the next thing we'll be bringing in Sharia law, even at a local level. And you don't need, statistically, many more Muslims in a country to do a takeover.
Well, I mean, there are certain things that are concerning, undoubtedly. And certainly in Tower Hamlets, where they've had that man, Lutfur Rahman, who got in, he got in first as a Labour mayor. And then when the Labour Party threw him out, he then got re-elected as an independent because all the Muslims in Tower Hamlets voted for him. And in Tower Hamlets, they've had people literally assaulting women that weren't dressed as they wanted to. assaulting people that are drinking alcohol, because you're not supposed to drink alcohol in Islam. And that's been going on as vigilantes on the streets, which is a major concern in Tower Hamlets. But see, the other thing which is unacceptable in Sharia law is the fact that if anyone leaves their Muslim religion, they should be killed. Now, they won't be killing people yet because they don't yet have the power to be able to put someone to death for leaving their Muslim religion. But they will be assaulting them. And part of the whole demand for this new law for Islamophobia will be to basically to have the power to arrest and imprison people that leave their Muslim religion. That's what they want, because that is part of Islam. They haven't got it yet, but I don't think they'll ever be able to get that in the UK. But we wait to see. But it's absolutely vital that we expose what they're doing, we speak out against it, we expose what the small boats, what this illegal immigration is all about, expose it's all about trying to make the West more Islamic, and we put an end to it. You see, Trump has been very effective in the United States in doing exactly what I'm saying. He's closed the borders. There's no illegal immigration happening now in America. He's got 2.5 million that came to America illegally sent back, and certainly he's shoring up American society to make it clear that Islamic extremism in any form is not acceptable. And even though they've got Mamdani now elected as a mayor in New York, he's passing federal laws to make it almost impossible for Mamdani to do what he wants in New York. So it's happening in America. It can happen in this country. And the more it happens in America effectively, the more we can show it can happen effectively in this country too. Certainly it needs to happen, yes.
Yeah, we've got to open our eyes, and I include myself in this because one of our carers that came to look after us after our accident was a Muslim young girl. And we're in Spain at the moment, she had to flee the country because her relatives threatened her with death. And what did she do? Well, she was a Shia and she married a Sunni. Now, this is within their religion, even. It's not against anybody that is outside their religion. And she's had to flee Britain to save her life. And if you talk to somebody that is part of this setup, it's horrible. And it is not like Christianity, it's not like Buddhism, it's not like Hinduism. It is there to be aggressive and take over. So wake up, people. And maybe we could say, wake up Nigel Farage, because there's a lot of Muslims in his new setup. Is he being wise, Sid?
Well, you see, I think what's going on with reform is basically what I would call naked infiltration. You see, they're trying to infiltrate that party because they see it's quite possible that reform could be formed in the next election. The Muslims want to have influence over whatever party is running the country. So, I mean, they tried, by the way, to influence Trump as well. I mean, there was a whole group of Muslims for Trump. And they tried to get into the Republican Party. They tried to get on side with him, and they're saying, we'll support Trump. But Trump took their support, but hasn't compromised at all with them. So it's basically saying, okay, support me if you want, but you're not going to get anything out of me, which is basically a perfectly good position. But no, you see, what Nigel Farage can't do is basically say, I don't welcome any Muslims in this party. But you see, we have a policy in the Christian People's Alliance that every candidate and every officer of the party must be a committed Christian. Now, you see, that safeguards the Christian People's Alliance from infiltration and is extremely important, extremely important. Now, Nigel Farage needs to have some sort of policy that basically says that, in reform, we uphold Christian values as fundamental to the British society. And if he doesn't have that policy, and every candidate and every officer of the party must support that position. And if he doesn't take on board something like that, which is basically what Trump has done in the USA, then he'll have more and more infiltration until he finds that reform is no longer, a party that Christians can support. That's the danger.
I did ask Gavin during the interview what hope there was, and he said, we need a strong person to stand up there. And he did mention Tommy Robinson, because he met him about 10 years ago. And at that time, he said he was a brave person because, of course, the elites have really got at him. Whatever you think of him, legally, this would not have happened in the States, could not have happened in the States. But Gavin thought at that time nothing should proceed. Then allegedly he became a Christian about 6 months ago. Gavin met him again. And the jury's still out, to quote Gavin. But let's see what happens there. That's not saying Tommy Robinson come and save the country, but it has to be somebody tough, was what he was trying to get over.
Yes, I've also heard that Tommy Robinson has become a Christian, and I also heard that he became a Christian about 6 to 9 months ago. The problem is that he represents a violent reaction to Islam, which is something I don't support. And I've actually seen that myself physically when his supporters turned up at Speaker's Corner where I was and started fighting with the Muslims. You see, I believe that our reaction has to be verbal, not physical. Because you see, it's what Jesus basically told: go into all the world and preach the gospel, teaching people, and Jesus spoke out against the Pharisees. So with some very, very strict words, if you like, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, you're like whitewashed tombs that appear beautiful, but inside you're full of all sorts of uncleanness. People have this idea sometimes that Jesus was just loving to everybody. He wasn't loving to everybody in the sense that he was unafraid to speak out. And we've got to be willing to speak out, but not to engage in violence. And that's the problem with Tommy Robinson, frankly, what he represents. Now, if he's become a Christian, which I believe he probably has, hopefully he will now renounce all violence. I'd love to meet up with him and talk with him as to where he is, Christian wise, spiritually. But at best, he's a young Christian that is finding his way. And it's very wrong for people in the Christian church to think, oh, now we can all now get behind Tommy Robinson, because that puts far, far too much pressure on him, frankly. What we should be saying is that maybe this is somebody that we can work with in future, and we need to get alongside him and help him and see whether we can give him support or not. That's the right approach, in my view.
Yeah, it's been reported to us yesterday, actually, that he's had to flee the country. He's got a target on his back. Who's aiming at it? It could be several people. But he is abroad at the moment, allegedly.
Okay, well, you see, the thing is, if he's now a Christian, he can now receive protection from God. And if he's got protection from God, then people that are attacking him will not succeed, which is basically what happened with Trump. Trump gave himself to God and sought God's protection. And then we've had several people that have tried to kill him. And it's almost incredible, frankly, that that guy that shot him wasn't successful, because he was shooting from a very short distance. And anyone with a rifle from that distance should have easily been able to kill the person he was shooting. The fact that he missed was just like unbelievable. But it was God's protection from Trump. It's there. The other guy that was on his golf course that was hiding in a bush, the fact that one of the security guys saw the end of his rifle sticking out the bush, and basically shot at him, and saved Trump's life, again, was incredible. because it must be incredibly difficult to see the butt of a rifle sticking out of a bush. I mean, and Trump could very easily have been shot and killed by that guy. It's but God
What?
protects people. God protects his own, and
Well,
God will be protecting Tommy Robinson.
yes. Well, while accepting what you're saying, Sid, I have got two words to say to you about that, and that is Charlie Kirk, of course.
Yes, who knows why that happened? He had been warned, by the way, but didn't heed the warnings. But who knows why God allowed that to happen? It may have been, some people are indicating it may have been that Charlie Kirk was about to go down a completely different path. And therefore, God had to remove him to preserve his integrity. But I don't know why that happened. But I do know that God could have saved his life, but didn't.
Lastly, and personalising this a bit and getting back to sport before we go, Sir Jim Manu,
Mm.
Ineos has come out with colonisation, and Gavin Ashenden said he was right. Was he?
Oh yeah. So I think his choice of words was probably not right, but undoubtedly, I think if he'd have said that they are on a crusade in order to make the West more Islamic, you'd have said absolutely right. To say they are colonizing the UK was probably not an accurate choice of words, but what's behind it is a concern that there is a movement underway to make the West more Islamic. That's what needs to be identified and understood by everyone, frankly.
Significantly, before we finally leave this subject, I'm reminded of the let's call them advertisements that GB News puts on when each presenter says something about their program. Please watch this. And I'm thinking of Michelle Dewberry, ex-apprentice, of course. And she's got a show on in the early evening, and her promo comes out with a statement to the nation. I'd like to shake you so that you understand what I'm saying. That's frustration. Now,
Oh,
have we reached frustration? Wake up, Britain. Is Gavin right? Is she right?
well, we've got to be clear and accurate and understand what's going on. And there's they are right to a certain extent that we need to be concerned over what's going on. But we also know as Christians that Islam doesn't have the final answer. Christians will have the final answer. Jesus will be victorious. And the idea that Islam will succeed in conquering the West and drive everyone out is not true. Jesus will conquer and will win the battle. And one other thing I would say, by the way, is that when that statement was made by Jim Ratcliffe, Keir Starmer used it. Keir Starmer demanded an apology, and he used it to divert all the attention against all the pressure he was under over Peter Mandelson, and basically managed to divert all the media to talking about Jim Ratcliffe rather than talking about him. So it was a very clever ploy on his behalf, far more than the reality of a problem that Jim Ratcliffe had created.
Back to football before we go, and back to Arsenal. I threatened you with Arsenal. They've been criticised by quite a few pundits for playing a boring game. And I don't agree with what's been said, actually. But something came out to me when Man U played West Ham last weekend. And I groaned because, of course, the West Ham manager is Espiritu Santo, Holy Spirit, if I can think of a manager misnamed, I don't know, let's call him Nino. And he is a master of parking the bus, of defensive play. And if he is removed to another land, I will rejoice. He spoiled that many games, Sid, and he made it so awkward, as he has done for any team. What's he achieving? Well, he's stopping teams going down into a lower division, of course, but it's ruining the game. Arsenal, you've got to play a number of teams scrapping at the bottom, and often it's more difficult to play those teams than the top teams, especially towards the end of a season. But there must be some way out of this ultra defensive game. You've got an answer, Sid, I'm sure.
Well, no, I do think Arsenal have got themselves into a position where the Premiership is now theirs to lose because they've got points ahead and they've got a very strong team and they're being very successful. But they have to get now into a rhythm where they just start win, win, win. And it's likely, obviously, that teams are going to think, oh, we're expected to lose this game. So there's no point in attacking. We can't just attack Arsenal. We'll have to defend. They've got to find ways of getting around it. I mean, Guardiola's done that successfully with Manchester City time and time again, where at the end of the season, he's just gone into a win-win-win-win cycle where Man City just don't lose a game. If he goes into that cycle again at the end of this season, and Arsenal start to trip up, when Man City will win the title. So, but Arsenal at this point have got to really fight. They've got to fight like crazy. I want to see Arsenal win the title. I don't want to see Man City win it again. But it's between those two teams. Aston Villa has started slipping up, and they looked as though they were title contenders, but they're not anymore. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. But I hope Arsenal don't slip up. Yeah.
Yeah, we could talk for ages on the Aston Villa match this weekend with Newcastle and VAR, but I'm not going to be tempted, Sid. We're running out of time. Thank you so much. We'll see you very shortly.
Cheers.